Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on our session titled, Everyone Wants to Hold the Baby, Who Will Hold the Mother? Mood Changes and the Fourth Trimester. This program is funded by the New Jersey Department of Health and hosted by the Partnership for Maternal and Child Health of Northern New Jersey's Perinatal Mood Disorders Initiative. For those of you who don't know about our program, we are a nonprofit committed to improving the health of women, children, and families. I encourage you to visit our website, www.partnershipmch.org, to learn more about the different programs that the partnership provides. My name is Lorraine Jondo, a perinatal mental health coordinator, and I'll be facilitating this conversation with Jabina Coleman, the lactation therapist. Jabina G. Coleman is a licensed social worker and an international board-certified lactation consultant. She has dedicated over a decade to serving women, children, and families throughout the Philadelphia region. Jabina engages with communities through her work as the owner of Lifehouse Lactation and Perinatal Services, LLC, where she provides lactation consultation services and reproductive psychotherapy with a focus on perinatal mental health. Jabina is a dynamic national speaker spearheading the call to action. Everyone wants to hold the baby, who will hold the mother. Her professional experiences in hospital social work, community organizing and engagement, and private practices has drawn many to her for mentorship and leadership. Jabina uses her personal and professional experiences to inspire and promote emotional wellness and balance among her peers. Jabina's work has been published in the Clinical Lactation Journal. She is a published author for Breastfeeding and Human Lactation 6th edition and has been featured in multiple media outlets, including the Huffington Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, WHYY, and KYW. Jabina is the mother of 2 beautiful children, one of which she had the pleasure of breastfeeding for 3.5 years. As evidenced by her work, Jabina's passion for motherhood and social justice are intertwined. She educates and empowers families along their parenthood journey while dismantling systematic barriers impeding on a culture of health. Being a mother is not always easy and it doesn't always feel good. So Jabina, I thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us. I also want to thank all of you for joining us on this webinar. And at the end of our discussion, you will be given the opportunity to ask Jabina questions. I am inviting you to use the chat box to type your questions in, and we will try to get through as many as possible. So Jabina, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Lorraine, thank you so much for that warm introduction. I would really like to say thank you to you all for having me on your platform and to share my my work, my experience, and I don't always say expertise, but my expertise in my niche of breastfeeding, lactation, and maternal mental health. So first, I want to start by saying that everyone wants to hold the mother who will hold the baby is a call to action. This call to action upholds and brings awareness to maternal health issues, the maternal health crises that is affecting predominantly Black women in the United States. It's also bringing and shedding a light on access to equitable health care, for holding our legislators and policymakers accountable, as well as moving forward with actionable items in step for legislative change and overall equitable health care for women of color and marginalized communities. Today, we'll talk a little bit about, many of you may know me, and if you don't, I'm affectionately known as the lactation therapist. And the reason being is because of my unique background as a reproductive psychotherapist and a board certified lactation consultant. And so today, what we'll talk a little bit about is, one, understanding the effects of health disparities on people and women of color, recognizing the signs and symptoms of PMADs, which also which stand for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, and understanding the importance of screening and assessing and just being aware that perinatal mood and anxiety disorders are on a continuum. And it's important that whether you're a birthing person, a partner or support person, or a medical professional, that you are aware of the components that make up PMADs and where your resources are.
Awesome. Thank you, Jabina. And once again, thank you very much for joining us. And before we begin, can you please elaborate on why maternal mental health is a public health imperative?
So maternal mental health is a public health imperative because it's the #1 complicating disorder during the childbearing period. And so it's really important that we understand that that perinatal mood disorders affect 1 in 5 women. And for women of color, the numbers are smaller, 1 in 3 women. And so, it is the #1 childbearing complication. And so it's important that we understand not just the statistics, but also understanding that mental health overall is very much stigmatized. And so not that it just affects the mother, but it also affects the family dynamic. It affects the bonding between mother and baby, and it trickles down into other areas of life and just how folks operate in society. So it's really important that we understand and we shed light and we bring notice and awareness to perinatal mood disorders. It is actually, July is Black, Indigenous, people of color Mental Health Awareness Month. So this being here on this platform and being able to share this information is also a privilege. So again, it is a health imperative because we do know that women and birthing folks are experiencing changes in mood during, before, during, and after pregnancy. And what we're also seeing is that folks are not being assessed, diagnosed, and treated appropriately. I'll share a little bit with you all. I have a soon to be 16-year-old and a 6-year-old. And 16 years ago, I experienced perinatal postpartum depression and postpartum OCD. I was not assessed, I was not diagnosed, and I wasn't treated for it. I don't know how I got out of it, but I can say a year later, I kind of got out of one of the darkest places of my life. And so from my personal and clinical experience, it is personal to me, but it is also a part of the work that I do on a daily basis. The reason why I also think that when we talk about lactation and we talk about mental health, in the work that I do, I recall, and it continues to happen, before being able to assess a mother-baby dyad and talk about the lactation issues, I really had to peel back the layers of emotional stress that folks were experiencing. And not just the mother or the birthing person, but also their support partner or father. And so it is very important that not just our lactation professionals or our psychologists or therapists understand these differences and nuances in perinatal mood disorders, but it's also important that our community health workers and our birth workers are also very much aware of signs and symptoms and resources in their communities to provide support.
Jabina, thanks for sharing your experience with PMAD, and I'm glad that you were able to get out of it. And that brings me to my next question, which is, why is it important to destigmatize mental health?
It's important to destigmatize mental health because mental health, again, it has no face. So it doesn't pick and choose who has it, but we also know that our most vulnerable populations also are more affected by it in increasing numbers. And so it's important that it's destigmatized so that people feel comfortable with whatever their form of resource to getting support is. And it doesn't have to always be therapy. Treating your mental health can look so many different ways. It could be having your sister circle. It could be just I know a lot of folks are not open to traditional Western society of therapy. However, talking to an elder, talking to a grandparent or a cousin, aunt, a sister circle, having a group of men that you, or just people that you're able to confide in, learning different coping mechanisms and skills. And so it's important that we destigmatize mental health, because it is affecting folks, and especially birthing people, at an alarming rate. It's important that we normalize the idea that in order for us to be holistically well, right, from an emotional standpoint, a physical standpoint, that your mental health isn't separated, right? So when we think about therapy and we think about mental health, it always appears that your head and your emotions is separate from your entire body, right? So if you're not emotionally well during your pregnancy, if you're not emotionally well in general, that is going to definitely trickle down hormonally to your baby and to other areas of your life. And so we know untreated depression definitely affects the fetus. And so we, really want to make sure that as a culture of people, community of folks, that we are really being able to speak to mental health with, none of the stigma that's attached, that like folks are crazy if you share or disclose that you're not feeling well emotionally. There are reasons why people don't want to disclose, and primarily in the Black community, because Black women are often looked at as unfit mothers. And so there are reasons why people do not want to disclose, but it is our duty to be able to, one, break these barriers, and to definitely, encourage people to receive the support that they need when they need it.
Awesome, Jabina. Thank you very much. And as a Black woman myself, I've come to learn that every time you mention mental health, they'll tell you to pray about it, right? Pray about it. It would be better. Go to God about it. So I completely understand where you are coming from and how important it is to destigmatize mental health. So what should partners and family members know about their role in supporting and birthing a birthing person mental health?
So before I answer that question, I do want to just touch back on what you said in terms of, just praying about it. And as a psychotherapist myself, I say pray about it and do whatever else makes you feel good, right? And it could be praying about it and going to therapy, praying about it and, seeking support from your sister circle, or, doing any other means that is going to enhance your mental health and mental well-being. And so I do say that we don't negate, cultural practices and traditions of healing at all. However, uplifting them and also finding other means and other ways of supporting, again, your mental wellness.
Yes, definitely. And it is important to pray and go to therapy. And whatever therapy looks like for you, I always say do that. And in our program, we do encourage support groups. And we always encourage our mom to join our support group. So thanks for sharing that. Support doesn't always mean therapy also. So right. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so to answer your question about what should partners and family members know about their role in supporting birthing people, I think it's important to understand that in order for a woman, a birthing person, to thrive, they need a few components. And this is having a supportive network or support person. That could be partner, that could be birth worker, that could be, aunt, uncle, grandma, cousin, some person that's close to them, that's able to, support them throughout the process. They also need a professional person to care for them throughout the prenatal period. And that person can be a midwife, it could be a doctor, a doula, lactation professional, all of your birth workers and medical professionals. It could be any one of those people multiple people. And then I think a very key component is having a safe place and space to really talk about their experience, their birthing experience, their pregnancy, their labor and delivery, a safe place to have afterwards. So there are three components. It's, it is your, support people, medical professional, and then a safe place afterwards, which also can look like a support group. And so it's really important that those components are there. So for our partners and support people, I often say that you know your partner best. You know this person more than typically anyone else, right? Especially if this is someone that you're very close with, that you're living with, or you've had an extended relationship with over the years. And so it's really important that our support people understand, they know what their partner or the birthing person, their behaviors, their mood, they know baseline. And it's important to know that after pregnancy and during pregnancy, that their emotions might shift. So we're very familiar with baby blues. Baby blues happen within the first 2 to 3 weeks of life. It comes on, it's, hormonal driven. Folks might feel tearful, sad, and it really doesn't affect their day-to-day activities other than like the strong emotions and feelings. And if it does, they're able to bounce back. However, if those emotions and feelings last any longer than those 3 weeks, and I say for women of color, if it lasts any longer than 2 weeks, that's kind of a red flag that we want to keep an eye out and or get some professional support or just talk about it and bring awareness to it. And so it's really important that, we are aware that baby blues is a period, and I encourage and invite folks to come to my, prenatal classes, because this information is shared, and bring a partner, bring a friend, so that they are aware of what they're seeing. And if I tell folks, give yourself some markers, babies are often seen in the 6 weeks postpartum. So again, if that 6 weeks postpartum, you're going to that, or mom, the birthing person is seen 6 weeks postpartum. And if again, at 6 weeks, things are not right, please share this information with the providers. Babies are seen very frequently in that 6 week period. Share this information with the pediatrician. So partners, you are able to, you hold a lot of power in your hand in supporting birthing people, because you have access to them and you are the ones that are with them more frequently than providers are. You have more of that insight. And so it's really important that one, I tell people in the prenatal period, when we're planning baby showers, also have a postpartum plan. And, write that plan with your support people, with your friends in mind. So support can look very different for so many people. We're talking about people who have multiple children during, the school year. Do you have someone to pick the kids up? Maybe help with baths or cooking dinners, just helping with around the house, laundry and all of the duties that come with, taking care of the home. That's very strenuous during the prenatal period. So there's so many things, and it's all individual, but this is the time that is encouraged for folks to have the discussion, have conversation about your postpartum period. I recall when I had my son, I had my mom, my aunt, my great cousin, my uncle. My uncle went to the livestock and he made me chicken soup. And I didn't do anything. But 10 years later, right, married, and I had my daughter. It was just my husband at the time and me and my daughter in the house, and there was no one, right? I didn't have that close-knit community. So it's really important that during your prenatal period that you really build what you want, what you think you may need support with. And support might change, right? For those folks having cesareans, it's really hard to get yourself up and running and, going physically because you're very sore. So do you have someone with a car if you don't have a vehicle? What does transportation look like? All of these components that make up our everyday lives that we know after having a a baby going through labor or delivery like that, it takes a toll on us. And so from emotional perspective and standpoint, it's really important that this goes back to breaking stigma and, being vocal about it. I also say to folks who have a history of depression or anxiety that they are also more likely, there's an increased likelihood that they may have a perinatal mood disorder in the postpartum period and or during the pregnancy. And so it's really important, if this is you, that you have these open, honest conversations, whether it's with your partner, family member, and or your medical provider. So important that this information is out there. And also, if this is you, like I disclose all the time, right? A lot of my work has come from my own personal experience as a mother. And so initially in my work, I've been doing this work for a really long time, and it hasn't been until the last few years that I said, hey, I too, suffered from postpartum depression. And I also actually suffered from postpartum OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And so it's really important that we know ourselves. And I'll touch a little bit on, the continuum of PMADs, which consists of, perinatal depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, postpartum PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, postpartum psychosis, which we hear a lot about in the news, and not necessarily the nuances of the other diagnoses. And so, I had no clue about postpartum OCD. All I knew was that I would wash and rewash and sanitize and resanitize all of my baby's bottles and clothes. And I had a lot of intrusive thoughts of, what if something happened to him when I was driving the car, or just like all these thoughts, if I left him in the crib, something may happen to him in the crib. His head might get stuck between the railings, like all of these thoughts. And, when we think about, again, back to destigmatizing and breaking stigma, I felt like I couldn't tell anyone this, because if I did, then I would be I was young, I was 22, then I'm like already a young Black 22-year-old. I, graduated undergrad, but also felt like if I were to say anything to anyone about this, then I am an unfit mom, And so really encouraging folks to say that, in the event that you're having these experiences, they are very common, and it doesn't make you less of a mother or less of a person, less of a parent if you are having these. But what I think is important is that we build our community around our birthing experience to support us, especially during the fourth trimester. Women and birthing people get a lot of support during the prenatal period. I used to work in an OB clinic, and, would love to see all the moms coming in and watching them grow, and, all of the beautiful and wonderful things that happen during the prenatal period. And then I don't see them, they deliver, and then it's 6 weeks. They may or may not come back for their appointment, and that's it. And then we lose contact and we lose touch. And so, the hopes is that we're able to support women and birthing people and make more points of contact, and not just at the 6-week period, being able to uplift and support and guide, educate, and this goes not just for the birthing person, but also for their family and their community. All of my classes, I invite birthing people and their support partners, support person or partner to attend, because it's so important that we educate the people that are closest to them. So again, I just encourage, our support people to, be open to, trotting along the journey. It takes two to have a baby, oftentimes, not always, right? However, I never exclude dads. Like, that is one thing, or the partner. Like, this is so important that we include them in the conversation all the time, every visit. And there's, research out there that says one in 10 men experience postpartum depression, right? Because they too are feeling the effects and the stress of being a birthing person, being a parent, you know, returning back to work, all of the stressors that come with, you know, our westernized culture and parenting. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm glad that you touched base on the importance of having a village, because we've all have heard of that statement, "It takes a village to raise a child." And being that a mom support is very necessary, it takes a village to also carry the mom. So thanks for sharing that, Javina. And I'm going to open the floor for questions. So the first question is it normal to experience negative emotions such as extreme sadness coupled with anxiety while breastfeeding? What should I do if I feel this way?
So it is common. I don't have all the statistics on that, because it all depends individually on the person, and some more history. However, it could be a result of a few different things. For some nurse folks, and I don't, if you can repeat, did the person say breastfeeding or?
Yes. So
Okay.
is it normal to experience negative emotions such as extreme sadness coupled with anxiety while breastfeeding? What should I do if I feel this way?
Yeah, so there can be a number of reasons why that's happening. One thing that comes to mind is dysphoric milk ejection reflex, which for some people it does happen. It could be hormonal, where there is shifts in dopamine levels, but again, it's all individualized. And if that is consistent and it's happening often, I would strongly recommend reaching out to either lactation professional or your provider, OB provider, PCP, to discuss, you know, what's going on. But that's a great question.
All right, thank you very much for answering. The next question is, what will daily support look like for birthing people in the midst of the pandemic?
Yes. So in the midst of the pandemic, you know, it changes every day. But as I mentioned earlier, and Lorraine reiterated, that building a village is so important. Support looks, you know, because we don't have means and ways of our traditional support, which is, you know, physical touch and seeing people and being able to, you know, have these connections with our, whether it's a doula, you know, physically going into your medical appointment. It is being now creative and innovative, you know, building your support virtually. And this is kind of what we have, you know, come to, which is, you know, building a virtual support. And so it's really important that one, you know, if you are if you're pregnant, birthing person, you know, looking out for resources around doulas, and you know, doulas are doing virtual doula support. You know, reaching out to your medical provider to see what additional resources are in the community, taking prenatal breastfeeding classes or parenting classes online. I tell people to still social distance and go outside and get some fresh air, you know, and try to build some normalcy around this time. You know, there's a lot of grief and loss that's happening because, you know, folks are really excited, and many folks have prepared their pregnancies and, you know, just excited to be pregnant and, you know, giving birth. And so I think it's really important that you try to build some normalcy and still find ways to enjoy, to bring joy into this experience, but definitely connecting virtually. There's so many virtual options right now. So all classes are virtual. Many classes are virtual. Again, breastfeeding support groups, prenatal breastfeeding classes, parenting classes. Everything is online in this, but still finding those people, finding the ones that are closest to you. And if you don't have, because I'm very, some people don't have support. And so right now it makes it even harder. And I think although it makes it harder, a virtual platform has really opened up the doors for support.
Definitely, virtual community. Build your own virtual community is quite important. So thank you for that. Our next question is, what words of encouragement do you have for women who may be experiencing extreme guilt for not being able to breastfeed?
I say this, one, trust the process and trust to know that whatever decision that you are making for your baby is the best decision. I think we get so caught up in, whether, this breastfeeding is the best thing to do, and if I can't do it, then I'm a failure. And what I say to those people is that there's so many reasons why it may not work. Before we get there, though, again, knowing who the professionals are, whether it's a doula, your lactation professional, and that could be, lactation counselor, certified breastfeeding specialist, lactation consultant, making sure that you have access and that you know where the resources are. That is important to help you on that journey. And even still, after all that work, and if it doesn't work out, it is still okay. And there is a lot of grief. There is a lot of loss. I personally, struggled. I wasn't able to nurse my son as long as I desired to. And some, and I still think back to, maybe I should have done this and maybe I should have done that, but he's a healthy, young, almost young, teenager now, and and there are other ways that we bond with our babies. Whatever decision it is, you're making the best decision. There's no handbook to parenting. I don't think our parents had a handbook, and so it's really important that we trust ourselves. There's a lot of criticism and there's a lot of, just tips and tricks and all types of things out there. And, by the time you come down to it, you've tried every trick, you've tried every, everything in the book, and whatever you do specifically, it's really individualized between you and your baby. And so, I say stay encouraged. I say to, not be so hard on yourself. And again, whatever decision, and this is going to be for a lifetime, whatever decision you make for yourself and your baby is the best decision.
Oh, thank you for reassuring them that they are not a failure. So that is great. Thank you very much. And our next question says, what are your thoughts on taking antidepressants while pregnant and breastfeeding? How do I know which medication are safer than others?
Wonderful question. And that is a question that is asked often, especially from folks who are experiencing changes in mood. And so what I say to that is, if folks do not, if medication is needed and you are depressed, the hormonal changes that happen with depression will still affect the baby. And so with medication management, if that is the route that your provider is recommending, most medications are not, there are few counter indications with breast milk. So you can definitely breastfeed. And so that is a question that we get all the time, and often folks are taking off medications during the first trimester, first few weeks of pregnancy, And I think that it's important that you work with your medical team about dosing and medication management, but also knowing that in terms of breastfeeding, most medications, most antidepressants, there aren't contraindicated with breastfeeding. So you can still take medication with breastfeeding. What we often see when folks are not on medication and may likely need medication and or some form of therapy is that if you are depressed, there is still hormonal changes that are happening, which will increase the likelihood that you may not be bonding with your baby as well, that you're not responding to certain cues that your baby's having. And so it's still, if we're not treating the depression one way or another, it can still definitely affect the baby. And so whatever that decision is for you, whether it's medication management, whether it's psychotherapy or any other healing mechanism, healing practice, that I think that you definitely make this decision with your medical provider. And again, whatever decision you make is the best decision for you and your family.
Thank you for that. I have a following question, which asks, how can parents with babies in the NICU still breastfeed if they want to? And what effect have you seen on parents navigating the NICU and breastfeeding during the pandemic?
Yeah, so breastfeeding looks very different for everyone, right? So breastfeeding can be baby to chest, breastfeeding could be exclusive pumping, breastfeeding could look like using a supplemental nursing system. So breastfeeding looks different for everyone, especially for our NICU folks. If you do have a baby in the NICU, oftentimes you're given a hospital grade pump and you are supported and provided resources and information on pumping. It's very important that you are pumping consistently and frequently so that you're able to keep up with the demand of the baby. It's also important that you still also find a network and support, because it gets lonely. Pumping is not, for a lot of people, and those of you out there who have been pumping or have pumped, it's not easy. It wasn't the best thing that I wanted to do. And so, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of work, it takes consistency, and especially because the baby isn't close by. And so what I have seen is that and I'll talk a little bit around postpartum depression, because we often see moms and birthing people who have babies in the NICU experience postpartum post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of PTSD around the NICU experiences, the beeping sounds, visions of all the cords and all of the tubing and all of the things. And so it's important that, one, understanding that breastfeeding looks very different, and, pumping is breastfeeding. And so if, for those who may know that their baby may be in the NICU, oftentimes you don't. Definitely there are support groups, there are other parents. Really talking to other parents about their experience, I think, is important. And in talking about a lot of the frustrations, because there's a lot of frustrations that come with being in the NICU. NICU nurses are oftentimes very supportive of families and, supporting them while pumping, giving recommendations about maybe having the baby's picture, the baby's blanket, so that you can stimulate the letdown and, get the milk to flow during the pumping session, or, taping the cry of the baby or the coo of the baby so that you can hear the baby while pumping. So there are different, ways and different techniques that you can incorporate, just more of a warm environment and to mimic, in the, as if you were close to your baby or your baby was closer to you. But it can be challenging. It takes, like I said, a lot of effort, a lot of work to get on a pumping schedule, because, you know, to maintain a supply, it's, you know, supply and demand, really having to remove milk consistently and often. And during the time of COVID, to answer that part of the question, I haven't had a lot of interaction and a lot of clients who haven't been in the NICU, but we do know that like a lot of things, COVID has added this added stress, you know, and so I can only imagine that, you know, just taking extra precautions with sanitizing and making sure that, you know, when you're out in the community or you're home, that you're taking all the protective measures to sanitize yourself and making sure that, you know, and so I actually would go back and, you know, I'm not sure what the regulations and recommendations are with pumping products and, you know, pumping parts and things like that. But I can only imagine that it is also very, you know, new and stressful for a lot of people, just an added stress.
Awesome. And I'm glad that you put emphasis on the fact that pumping is breastfeeding, and that breastfeeding looks different for everyone. So thank you for that. Our next question is, how do you think the pandemic is affecting a mom's emotional well-being? What suggestion can you give mothers to mitigate the negative effect of maternal mental health during this difficult time?
So I think that what we're seeing a lot with COVID is grief and loss, you know, and frustration. So a lot of loss and autonomy around this, you know, new pregnancy or new baby, and a loss of community, sense of community, because although we have a virtual world, a lot of this is hands-on, physical touch. You know, it's so important that we touch one another. You know, we recommend and we encourage skin-to-skin contact for babies, right? Because it increases the bonding. And we as humans and as people, you know, we thrive off of physical touch as well. And so I've seen a lot of grief and loss around loss of autonomy, loss of, you know, just being able to plan and to be present around this new pregnancy and having to adjust. And, you know, for so many reasons, you know, we have folks who tried so long to get pregnant and then they're pregnant and, you know, and then it's COVID. And so you're unable to really have these intentional moments with people. Second part of the question, I think, was around mental health.
Yes, it says, what suggestion can you give mothers to mitigate the negative effect of maternal mental health during this difficult time?
Yeah, I think, again, I can't stress enough village and finding people that you can be vulnerable with. Along with that is also other ways and other means of self-care. Self-care is really important. And so, you know, really finding means and ways that you can have a moment, whether it's in the shower, whether it's coloring, you know, journaling, listening to music, dancing, you know, finding some self-care. You know, you see memes all the time on social media. It's like, you don't have to come out of the pandemic with, you know, having a business and like all of these things, and, you know, but what I say is finding time and space to heal, finding time and space to reflect, and to just be, and to also know that it's okay to just be. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to know, you know, that this is hard. There is no right or wrong. There is no answer, right or wrong answer. You know, yeah. And so holding space for yourself, finding, you know, breaking up routine. We say, you know, find a routine during the day. And some days I'm like, throw the routine out the window, you know. So really whatever in this time feels right. I say try a modality of things, you know. Early COVID, I have some like colorings that my daughter and I did. It's on the fridge, and I was like, I need to get back to that. It's been about 3 months. I haven't done that, you know, and that, you know, was just so therapeutic. So really finding different ways to incorporate, just centering, try some yoga, try some breathing exercises. I think this time also there's, silver lining in this time. There's time that we can try things that we haven't done before. And especially because everything is now brought to us virtually. There are yoga classes online. Meditation has always been online and virtual, YouTube. So certain things have been accessible, but even the more now, like a lot of things are accessible virtually. So I say, there is no wrong or right answer. There is no one answer. But what I would say is just really, trying whatever you think might work for you. And today it might work, tomorrow it might not. And it's okay if, consistency goes out the window this week because we are in a pandemic. I have to bring that back to people that we are in a pandemic and it's really hard, but yeah. And so I just encourage you to find whatever works for you, and it might be more than one thing.
And in other words, what makes you feel good as well, right?
Whatever makes you feel good. If you want to like Netflix and chill, like do that, and I always bring it back to a village, finding people that you can just really talk to and be transparent with, because it's something about when you talk to someone else and they tell you that they have very similar experiences, right? The weight is lifted off your shoulder because you're like, oh no, like I'm not the only person that's having this experience. I'm not the only mom that's, doing this or having these thoughts or like, concerned about this. And so, really finding your tribe.
Yes. Okay, I have another question for you, and that is, what types of free virtual breastfeeding support groups are available for underserved communities?
So right now, I am the co-founder and co-creator of Breastfeeding Awareness and Empowerment, which is BAE. And BAE Cafe, we host BAE Cafes every Tuesday at 5 p.m. And so because it's virtual initially, I've partnered with the Free Libraries of Philadelphia, and we were hosting our groups in the library. However, now that we're virtual, every and anyone can join. And so I think that is the beauty of this time, right? That if there is a support group, it's free, it's open to the public, you can attend. And I think Facebook and Instagram and just Googling, support groups, a lot of hospitals also are having breastfeeding support groups offered virtually right now. So I think now is also the time, there might have been a group that, prior to COVID that you didn't have access to, or you wanted to try it out and you just could never get there. But now a lot of folks, again, are virtual. And so now this gives you the opportunity to say, hey, I wanted to try this group out. Let me go just to kind of see how it is. So I recommend you guys, if anyone's interested in attending BAE Cafe, join us, check us out. One thing I can say that also, and this is a shameless plug, that I can say about Breastfeeding Awareness and Empowerment Cafe is that we incorporate perinatal mood and anxiety disorders in our curriculum. And that again goes back to my niche of bridging lactation and mental health. And so we are really work from a trauma-informed framework and a reproductive justice framework. And so within our support group, we are very intentional about listening, supporting, and serving the whole parent, the whole family, the whole dynamic, and the whole person.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And our last question would be, how can we involve partners and fathers more during the pregnancy and after birth?
Awesome question. And, I was just watching one of my colleagues, Barbara Vernias. She's a student midwife and a doula. And, she started Dope Dads Need Dope Dads. And I actually watched one of her lives today, this morning. And she talked about why she started Dope Dads Need Dope Dads. from her initial work around dope moms need dope moms. And one being that, we're not taught how to parent. We really are taught how to parent just by observation of our community, of our family system, and our family unit. And so, and oftentimes, for many of us, we may not have our parent close by to help us parent and, teach us hands-on how to parent our own children. And so, she talked a little bit about that, and also realizing that the same goes for dads, right? And so really important that we support our partners because they too are experiencing this pregnancy. As a social worker, I would always say, and it's shameful, that we typically see, in our clinics, the parent, the birthing person will go in the back, they'll go into the room, and then the partner is left in the waiting room. And I get it, because some policies are, we need to screen for, domestic violence and abuse, and those things are very important, and we want to screen for them. But we also are leaving this other person in the room, in the waiting room, and that physically we just see, this drastic, it's nonverbal, right? Like we're working with this birthing person, but the father, we're going to just leave him. We don't have questions for them. And so what I am very intentional about and have always been intentional about is asking, hey, where is your partner? Bring them back. Hey, is this your first pregnancy, right? How do you feel about this pregnancy? Really engaging dads and partners in the conversation, because we'll be very surprised that there's so much information that they too provide to the discussion and even to the medical experience. They also are there witnessing a lot, especially around mood disorders. You'll ask, well, how have you been coping? How are things going? And then she'll say, oh, I'm just fine. And you'll see him give like, a look like, no, she's been like crying every night, or, she hasn't been herself. And so they are so important, not just for the handy things, right? Because our partners typically, right, are, the person who's like painting the room and putting the car seat together and putting the crib together and doing all of those things. But those people are so vital because they support the birthing person, but they also are transitioning. We see a lot of partners who are working more hours, right? Because they are providers, oftentimes are the provider, and they're working more hours, or they're nervous, they're anxious, they're scared, And so it's really important from a medical perspective that, we begin to include them, ask them questions, ask them how they're feeling. Yes, your patient might be the birthing person, but it's a unit, it's a family unit, especially if they are showing up to appointments. And we see that often. They show up to the first 3 appointments and you never invite them in, they won't show up anymore. And what will then happen is, oh, the partner isn't around, isn't available, the birthing person is, showing up alone. And oftentimes that's not the case. The case could be because we are not, we're not including them in the birthing experience from the start. So I hope that answered your question.
That was great, Jabina. Thank you very much. I'm sure our audience benefited from the knowledge you've imparted on us today. I greatly appreciate your presence. So before we end today's discussion, I just want to talk briefly about the Perinatal Mood Disorders Program. And our program, like I've mentioned before, is funded through the New Jersey Department of Health. And we provide emotional support to women through our emotional health and support programs, support group, and community events. We also provide professional and consumer education. And I encourage you to visit www.partnershipmch.org to learn more about our services. And also check our website to see Sisters That Breastfeed group. And if you're interested in joining a support group, feel free to learn about it at www.partnershipmch.org. Just a reminder that a recording of this program will be available on the Partnership YouTube page. So yes, again, thank you very much, and I appreciate your presence.